Butch Otter. Thank you and good morning. Thank you for that nice welcome. I thought I'd wandered into improv when I first came, and I was pleased to know that the gentleman, the timekeeper, that wasn't a zapper or a taser. That was just a little sound thing. But that does give me some ideas about the next legislative session. Are there any legislators in here? It's good to be with you this morning. Certainly, I don't have to tell you and go through all the statistical stuff to tell you where we are and that we're having a tough time. I immediately calculated a few of those sales and a few of those reductions. And when you can buy a house today for $75 a square foot, I would tell you that would probably take you back to the late 80s or the early 90s in order to be able to do that. When I was in the house building business, we were doing it for $35 and $40 a square foot, but then concrete was $35 a yard in place. It wasn't $120 a yard like it is today, although it's backed off of a little bit. There are some figures that I would like to share with you relative to unemployment. I think from a year ago at 2.7, we're now at 5.4. We actually doubled. We're still considerably under the nation. That's statewide. Here in Boise, it's almost at 5 points. And it's some tough times. It's some tough times. It wasn't that long ago where 5% or 5.5% or even 6% unemployment was considered full employment. Everybody that in many economies of the world, 6% would be welcome. But in the United States, it's not been welcome. In the United States, anybody out of a job, that is concern for all of us. Anybody that's not able to engage in the kind of economic activity they want, that's a concern for all of us. And we always engage to do exactly what we can in order to improve on it. Hit particularly hard the part of your industry. Once again, I don't need to tell you that construction jobs are down 17%. And right here in the Boise market, almost a third of that is right here in the Treasure Valley and the Boise market. And the particular trades and skills are down even more than that, and much, much higher. In fact, I think that's down almost 15% right here in the Treasure Valley. Electricians and plumbers and framers and that sort of thing. Speaking of framing, when I came in here, I thought, it was nice of them to invite us in here while they were under construction. But they said, no, this is an art place. And now you see sometimes why I struggle with some of those art appropriations as well as on the national level. Well, that is tough news. That's bad news. But let's take a look at where do we go from here. We already know the bad news. You've experienced it. I've experienced it. Your neighbors, your friends, your family have all been through it. So where do we go from here? As you have seen on the state level, my obligation is as soon as I see a little few clouds on the horizon within the statutorial allowances that I have, I immediately start cutting back. And I'm allowed only to cut back that which we actually experienced. So what I'm saying is that every week, Mike Ferguson sends me over a little note, says sales tax are down this much, income collections are down this much, the economic activity in the state is down this much. Gavin Gee sends me over and says the banks are doing this or doing that. I get from the insurance company, I get all these figures, and we kind of go through a little matrix and put them all in the indices and decide, what we probably need to start warning people about. But in actual cutbacks, I am limited by statute to only say, well, if there is a 1% reduction in sales tax and income tax across the board, general fund, if there's a 1% reduction, 30 million bucks, that's all I can hold back. I can't look at a trend and say, like you can look at trends and say, well, you know, we reduced this house 20 grand. Now, if we reduce it another 5 and we go out to the marketplace and say, we got a $25,000 reduction here and it's so much a square foot, you can see that because you see trends. And if you got a distressed piece of property, you want to move, you got a mortgage coming up, somebody's packing a load that they don't want to necessarily carry and the bank's knocking on the back door, you can do that. I can't do that. All I can do is what the state is actually experiencing. I will tell you this. Now, I'm not going to get out ahead of my legislative leadership meeting next Monday, but I've asked the legislative leadership to come in because I think we need to agree that we need to double, at least double, maybe triple, whatever we can agree with the present holdbacks that we've got. In order to sustain us through this fiscal year, which will end June 30th, I really think that we're probably looking at a considerably higher holdback than the 1% that was affected about a month and a half ago. That's why when you heard me say I got a 1% holdback, and that's the money I actually took away from it. So we took $30 million away from it, 28,600,000. But then I also, and the media didn't quite understand this, and so if you read The Statesman, and I'm not suggesting that you should, but if you did, they didn't understand another 1.5% reserve. Now, y'all understand reserves. You say, listen, you know, we were going to spend this money in the first quarter of 2008. Well, we may not have that money. And so why don't you delay the expenditure of that money just as long as you possibly can until hopefully mid-year, into the second quarter, into the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, we can say, yeah, go ahead and spend that money, or no, we can't. And the reason I had to ask for a 1.5% reserve, because I could see the trend. 1% holdback, another 1.5% in reserve, which told every agency that if you were going to buy a new car, if you were going to buy a new computer, but you can still get along with the old one, if you were going to buy some new furniture, if you were going to hire a new person, perhaps to fill a presently vacant position that you've been getting along without for 4 or 5 months anyway, don't do it. Don't do it until I can give you, hopefully, a more positive signal into the second, third, or fourth quarter. Maybe next February, maybe next April, and at least maybe next June. I can tell you to go ahead and spend the money. Well, that's why it was reserved and termed as a reserve, because legally, I can't say I want you to hold back. But I would tell you this, and you should be proud of this fact, that every one of those agencies came forward with a 1% budget, a 1.5% or a 2% budget holdback, and a 2.5% hold back, and they did it. They did it within a week. The business people, the people that have been in business that I was successful in getting into, and grateful for the fact that they would come and head up some of these agencies, that kind of discipline has really helped in these tough times, and it's going to help because I believe, at least on the state level, I believe folks are already looking right now at the early sales for Christmas. Probably people who normally in Idaho would spend $900 a year on Christmas. Looks like maybe $700 is probably a better figure this year, but probably a $200 deduction. Well, you know what that means? That's $12. That's $12 to me in sales tax.